Right, episode mo bibi akwaba mfambra 2K nisem blog so ewo YouTube so episode ayaba as usual say the city no yaba ne se ya ne chese eye info ahodo a ekoso ewo Ghana se ne bobo bia no a ne yaba besume yo hefo ne tiefo nya na episode anem ne wo kase no we any info ene yensa kan de ba besumu na episode story ano de message so benya bre obeje bre na wo de ti wa hwe video na akwa si se be ya onso wo comment bia betimi de comment na aba ewo comment section ho no wada no betimi so a share am ofoforo nso enya ensem ni bi eti na mempese m kase betenti yenko ne yenko hwese de video ni esitie emfamra
formulate policy. Now, clearly, the NPP has told us over and over again that their philosophy, the framework they use, is something called property-owning democracy, which is extremely primitive. It's an extremely primitive form of capitalism. I mean, you know that capitalism has evolved over a period of time, and it is reforms which has led to modern capitalism. And modern capitalism really carries the title of social democracy. Social democracy is not socialism. It's a variant of capitalism. It's a development. But capitalism in its most primitive form is what is known as property-owning democracy. And you might want to trace it back to the days where only those who owned landed property could vote in elections and participate in making decisions, you know, about governance and so on. Now, if you take the history of political science, we are told, for example, that in ancient Greece, that was where democracy as we know it today started developing. But the Greek state had slaves. Slaves who had no rights whatsoever. And therefore the Greek state, in terms of today's definition, cannot qualify to be a democracy. Because society was stratified, you know, along class lines. And not all the classes had rights. And so on. So essentially, the National Democratic Congress has never claimed to be a socialist party. What it has claimed to be is that it's a social democratic party which is somehow or can somehow be seen as an advanced form of capitalism. So both the NDC and the NPP are capitalist parties. Excepting that one is very primitive and one has pretensions of modernity. You understand? So I think it's important to clear that. Now, having cleared that, there is something else that I think is important to clear. And it's this whole concept of development and how we achieve development. In this Fourth Republic, all the governments we have had exclude the mass of our people from the development process. So development is defined simply as borrowing money, usually huge amounts of money, by big men and women who constitute government, ministers and so on, get together and they borrow huge amounts of money. And then they bring in foreign contractors and consultants to do what they call development. So development is defined as overhead bridges, some roads, some hospitals, and so on. The people of Ghana are not involved in this process of development. They are not involved at all, at any level, in this process of development. Now, I'm hoping that one day we would have a concept of development which clearly implies the mobilization of our people to solve their own problem using their own resources. That, as far as I'm concerned, would be true development. So in terms of strategy, the two strategies look alike. The two strategies actually do not involve the mass mobilization of our people to resolve their own concrete problems of access to education, of improved health care, of better dietary conditions, and so on. And I hope that at some point this will change. Now, it's important to note that the State of the Nation address, as we saw yesterday, was so very full of drama. In fact, the dramatics dominated this address. And the first drama really has to do with the ADC of the president collapsing behind him. And it raises a number of important questions. First of all, it's important to find out what has happened to him. If he fell ill, has he recovered? And it's important to encourage his family and friends and so on, to take very good care of him. He collapsed in the performance of his duty as an employee of the state. And I think that we should show a lot of sympathy for this gentleman who collapsed behind the president. Now, one of the questions which arises immediately is, his collapse, was it due to a known health condition? And if it was due to a known health condition, how come that he continued to function as an aide to the president and was deployed to stand behind the president, for this address? You are standing behind the president. It's not just a show. It has so many implications. The role assigned to him also involved the protection of the president in case of an emergency. And if he had a known health condition, he could not have played that role, and his choice must be problematic, you understand? Now, if it was not a known health condition, is it that the health condition existed, but because of lack of examination, it didn't come up? And if that is the case, then there's another serious problem that we need to look at, and it's a security, problem. Now, this guy was on camera, and he didn't collapse all of a sudden. The collapse started. I saw it. It took minutes before he hit the ground, left and to the right and so on, before he eventually sank to the ground. Now, for those of us who were watching the address on camera or on television, we saw it happening. Now, my question is, didn't anybody else see this happening? Because if the president is speaking in such a forum, attention ought to be on him. Everything around him ought to be noticed and so on. How come that this guy was allowed to go through those processes and eventually collapse to the ground? Somebody must have failed in his duty, you know, and I think it's an important issue, you understand. The other thing that hit me, you know, was the president's own reaction. It was so very surprising, because I expect that there ought to be a certain bond between the president and his aide-de-camp. In fact, his very life depends on his aide-de-camp. And I was surprised that when this gentleman fell to the ground, the president did not appear to care. He didn't appear to care at all. He didn't go to his aid. I mean, people beyond the president had to rush to assist this gentleman. And that is a huge betrayal of an attitude which is most surprising. Because even people we don't know, if they collapse in public, our reaction is different. Now, there's an aide to the president who collapses to the ground, and the president does not lift a finger to help him. So I'm standing there, I'm watching television, and I'm saying, what is this? Isn't the president's general attitude to people around him, and indeed, if it is general attitude to people around him, then indeed, it's a huge statement. Then indeed, we must not be surprised at the performance of his administration. So this collapse of his ADC has become, you know, emblematic, and so on. For many people, they may see it as a very small thing and so on, but for me, it's not small. It betrays character. It shows us so many things about the president and his attitude to the people he works with and the people he's supposed to be working for. So for me, that was important. The show of the day, really, the show of the day, was the statement made by the deputy minority leader. That was the major statement of the day. And it gained more attention than the president's State of the Nation address, even though it lasted for only 3.5 minutes. I mean, the craftsmanship was excellent. You understand? The delivery was problematic. I mean, it was delivered in halting English. And please excuse me, I'm just being honest about it. The English was halting, you know. It was not about the diction and so on, but you saw a certain lack of flow and so on. But in spite of that, it was a master speech. It had some mastery around it because it captured the moment. And defined the State of the Nation address within 3.5 minutes to the admiration of even the outgoing president himself. And that was a really master speech. The State of the Nation address was supposed to give us an indication of what has happened to this state within the last 4 years. Some say 8 years, but I believe that essentially it's about the last 4 years, what has happened and what has not happened, and whether the government has done well or has not done well. The minority leader summed it all up. I said the verdict of the people is already out there, and the verdict of the people is the results of the election. You can't go to an election and lose so massively and claim to have done so very well unless you are arrogant and disrespect the verdict of the people. Clear? You understand? The power presidents and governments exercise is power which belongs to the people. And ultimately, it is only the people who can make a determination as to whether governments have done well or have not done well. And that determination is made by exercising their vote. Their vote is the verdict. And the people of Ghana, their vote, their verdict simply was that this government has done so abysmally over the last 4 years. So very abysmally. I mean, count the number of seats that the New Patriotic Party has lost. And even the seats that it won, the margins were reduced. I mean, this is an incredible defeat. It's never happened in the so-called Fourth Republic. And I say the so-called Fourth